Hello there. If you watched the last video, you know that we made this oval that's on our screen right here. Now let me just say one thing before we move forward. I'm not going in any particular order here of how we're doing these tutorials. I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of if I were the one learning it, how would I want to learn it? And the way that I like to learn things, especially something completely new like Photoshop, was to me I kind of wanted to get my hands dirty and do something. So at the end of the tutorial, I could say, I did something. Even though it was just a silly oval, I made something. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at it here. And then, I would want to learn the details later because if I learned all these fancy tools from the very beginning and exactly what they did and then tried to make something, I would probably forget and have to relearn them anyway. So I'm kind of looking at it from a learn as you build kind of thing. So let's get started and take a look here of what we did. The first thing that we did is make our canvas here. It's just this nice white spot for us to do some work. So let's kind of recreate that and we'll talk about why we did it this way. So let's go to File, New, or Command N, and that'll bring up your new canvas area here. Now, the first thing we should mention are dimensions, and the dimensions of how you're making your work is very important because it's much easier to use the proper dimensions to make the right kind of work. So let's say, for instance, you're making a print that's 8.5 by 11, just a regular sheet of paper, and you come in here and you say, how many pixels is that? You don't want to waste through all that time and try and figure it out. So they just made a bunch of options that said, well, you can just pick from one of these. So if you're making a print, you can do it in inches. If you're in centimeters or millimeters, you can do it that way as well. But we made ours in pixels just to make it easy. We did ours at 1920 by 1080, and if you'll notice, those are the resolutions for high definition video. And we did it that way because most of what I work with is either on a television or a projector screen, some sort of slide. And that 1920 by 1080 is a great place for me to start. It's a good size, and I can kind of get my bearings of what a print could look like on a screen. The second thing that we adjusted here is the resolution. Now, it's done in pixels per inch. You can do it in pixels per centimeter, but we'll keep it in pixels per inch. Now, let's think about this. Let's think if we had two cameras in front of us. One was a 5 megapixel and one was a 10 megapixel. And let's disregard the fact of camera types, bodies, lenses, any of that stuff. Just if you were looking at megapixels, most of the time, or all the time, really, 10 megapixels is going to be better than 5 megapixels because 10 megapixels has more. So it'll give you a bigger image and a clearer image because you have more pixels inside of that image. That kind of works the same way here. The default for digital work in Photoshop is 72 pixels per inch. If you're doing any kind of print, any kind of professional printing, they will normally ask you to do it in 300 pixels per inch or even sometimes 600 pixels per inch, which is pretty rare. But 300 pixels per inch is pretty high quality, and even though you don't necessarily need it for digital work, I like to keep it in 300 anyway, just to be sure that my prints are as high quality as possible. And that's all that we adjusted, so that's all I'm going to talk about for right now. So we hit OK, and that gave us this white canvas right here. The next thing that we did is we made a new layer, and that came up here. And let me do a quick explanation of layers real quick, and we'll get into a little bit more detail. In the last video I talked about if it were a cake and the different layers of a cake. So you have the very bottom, maybe you have some fruit, maybe another piece of cake on top of that, and some frosting. All of those things make up one cake, but there are many pieces to that cake that make it together, and they're put on top of each other. This is the same principle for layers. Now, we're looking at an image directly on top of it, so we're looking straight onto it. So rather than side by side, we're going to see our layers on top of each other. So let's say we made a new layer and we made an identical shape Or let's say we made it a square just so you can see the difference. And you know what, let's actually do it. Let's do it to make it a better explanation. So let's put our oval back. Now, let's make a new layer, and if you don't want to follow along and do this in your work, that's perfectly fine. This is simply for explanation. Here's your new layer. We'll leave it called layer 2. And just to show the difference here, let's change our marquee tool to a square. Now let's make a rectangle. So, okay, there's a basic rectangle, and you'll remember our selection tools, our selection right here, and we're going to pick a new color so we can see the difference. Let's make it blue. We'll hit OK. There's our color. We'll get our paint bucket again, and let's color it blue. Let's go back to our marquee tool, right click and deselect to get rid of our selection. Now if you'll notice, that square is on top of this oval. Now to make it even more apparent, let's lower the opacity just a little bit so you can see even clearer. That square is literally on top of the oval. And that's all that layers are, is one thing on top of another. Let's go ahead and bring that opacity back up. Now let's do vice versa. Let's move this oval on top of the square. You'll see that the oval has gone on top of the square. And to do the same representation, we'll lower the opacity by about the same amount, and you'll see that the oval is in fact over the square. It kind of makes a pinkish look right here because you're mixing blue and red. So that was just to kind of do a little bit of an explanation on layers. Now let's talk about the marquee tool a little bit again. Let's go back to our oval. The marquee tool is not only for making shapes. There are different methods to doing that, and we'll get to those one day, but the marquee tool is simply a selection tool. We happen to be able to use the marquee tool to make shapes because it makes a selection, and like we mentioned before, anything you do inside of that selection will fit that selection. So if we were to make an oval, and let's say we made it blue, again with our paint bucket, let me make a new layer for that. Alright, so you can, and now we can't do anything on the outside of it. That's because we've made a selection, and what all this is saying is Photoshop sees this and says, we're only going to work inside of this spot that you have selected. That's all it's saying. So let's go backwards a little bit. Let's undo, and we still have our selection here. Now, to prove the multiple use of a selection, let's pick our oval layer, and let's say for some reason we want to get rid of a part of our oval. So we have this selection made on our oval layer, and the delete key will delete whatever is inside of this oval. So let's hit delete and see what happens. Okay, we have deleted a section of our oval. If we go ahead and go to the marquee, right click, deselect, or Command D, you'll see that there's a chunk taken out of our oval here. Now, that was made with the same tool that we made the oval with. The marquee tool has multiple functions that I have learned to use very heavily. So let's undo what we've done. Hit Command D to deselect. Let's go ahead and get started using key commands. And now we are back to where we started originally. There's one thing I did forget to mention, and that was the Move tool. So let's talk about that just very quickly, and then we'll wrap this up. The Move tool is right here at the top, or you can just hit V, and that'll select that one. And in the last video we talked about how the Move tool did simply what it said. You could just move things around. So like this oval, we can click and drag and move our oval anywhere we want. So let's say we put it back generally in the center. That's the basic function of the Move tool. Now, there are a few other things that you can do with it as well, such as transformation. So we'll talk about that real quick. If you want to, let's say you're not happy with this oval and you want to change the way that it looks because you don't want to make a new one, and you meant to make it a circle, but you forgot how to do it. So what we can do is you'll notice these squares kind of in the corners and in between the corners, and that gives you points to where you can grab and do things with your shape, your picture, whatever the layer is. So let's say we want to make it look more circular. So get your mouse, put it on either left or right side. Even if your oval was up and down, you could get these sides and just make it more circular. So let's grab one of those squares, click, and let's drag it in. All right. We've made a little bit more of a circle now. Now, we talked a little bit about what Photoshop is doing whenever you do this, what it's thinking. Since you changed it from what it originally was whenever you created it right from the marquee tool, it's saying, okay, I know that you've done something different, and now I need you to be sure that you meant what you did. So let's say that it was a picture that you were working with and you were just trying to make it smaller, and you did it without constraining the proportions because you forgot how, and you made it stretched out. Well, you're like, shoot, I messed this up and I'm going to have to start over. Not necessarily. Luckily, I mean, you could use undo, but this is kind of a pre-undo function. So if you look up here, there's this no sign and this OK sign. And basically all that means is commit the transform, which is you're saying, yes, this is what I meant to do it, Photoshop. And this one says, no, I didn't want to do that, or it wasn't exactly how I wanted it to look. Go ahead and not do it. So let's not do it. And that brings us back to our original oval. Now let's say you did mean to do it, and let's take a look at what happens whenever you say yes. So let's say you did want it to be the circle, you like it, you go up to the check mark tool and you say commit. All right. Now this is the new standard. So whenever you click off of it, you can see that we have what looks like a Japanese flag here. We have this nice red circle there. So let's say I didn't, you thought about it again and you said, no, I still don't like the way that that looks. I thought I would, but I didn't. And you said, well, I already hit commit. It's too late. I have to make a new one. No, it's not. There is the amazing undo tool. And you can get to that by going to Edit, Undo Free Transform, or Command Z, and that'll bring you back to your oval. So just in case. Now, you could go many more steps back if you made a mistake much further into your design, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this covers a little bit more detail of how exactly we made this oval and why we made this oval this way. Now in the next video we'll talk a little bit about things that we can do with the oval to make it look a little bit more appealing and just make it a little bit more customizable. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thanks for watching. I hope this helps. We'll see you in a few.